On this episode of Diksha, we look at the three main bridges in spiritual progress. According to the system of yoga, spiritual energy, or let's say Shakti, moves upwardly along the 7 chakras. Now, there are the yogic disciplines that directly name chakras along spiritual progress and the awareness of the chakras, and other spiritual disciplines that do not make any mention of them. Now, the major takeaway point from this is not whether the chakras are relevant to spiritual progress or are important, but there's the main identification of particular, let's say, energy or awarenesses in the human being that are key in becoming spiritual or highly spiritual or fully developing as a human being. Now, those 3 key areas are the energy level of the person, the emotional stability of the person, and the mental stability of the person, which is what I mentioned are the 3 bridges of spiritual progress. For balance, the individual must be have a sound energy level, sound emotional capabilities or sound emotional level, and sound mental state. And these are also 3 key areas that, if not handled properly or properly managed, can be detrimental to spiritual progress. So, for example, the first level, which is physical energy, but also lack of physical energy will affect let's say, our ability to practice our spiritual discipline. So the energy level management is a very important aspect of it, which is getting enough rest, proper nutrition, and also in properly distributing our time and our energy between our spiritual discipline and maintaining our physical body. And maintaining physical body, I'm not going to go into detail what that means in terms of proper rest, how much rest, exercise, all these things. But the different systems of spiritual, let's say spiritual development, do take into account movement and physical activity as part of their discipline. Whether it's, let's say, for example, karma yoga, where they emphasize, okay, well, you go out and help people and you go out and you become physically active. But even in the systems of Raja Yoga, which are known to focus on mental discipline, they also place emphasis on nutrition and rest, and also on Hatha Yoga. So there is a combination in more or less all the systems of yoga for physical energy management. So if a person is, let's say, not specifically, following a guru who teaches specifically one thing, which is, let's say, scriptures, it is then up to the individual to be sure to manage their own nutrition and own exercise or activity levels. The downside to not doing that properly is lack of energy or lack of drive, in terms of being tired or not being able to sit, because it takes a certain amount of energy to hold the body and meditate, for example. That the body doesn't feel fatigued. If the body feels fatigued, then meditation becomes an uncomfortable and tedious process. So it is very key. The second part, or the second stage, the second bridge, is that of emotional stability. Now, when we get on to these bridges, then there's no real clear-cut let's say, discipline in terms of managing the emotions, because we are taught to be detached, and detachment brings about a certain amount of mental stability. But the act of detachment is a whole discipline by itself. So it is key to understand the importance of emotional stability and the downfall of not having emotional stability in, let's say, spiritual practice or a strict spiritual discipline. The reason is not developing a strong emotional fortitude, emotional stability. Not developing it will hinder spiritual development, especially when it comes to the mental aspect, which I'll explain shortly. Now, emotionally speaking, we are speaking about, well, being detached. If we are living a household or life, that we are detached from the actions and the benefits or punishments that come with personal relationships, interpersonal relationships with people, which is where the philosophy of karma comes in. But all these philosophies really mean nothing if a person does not feel that they work, which is where bhakti yoga comes in. Now, bear in mind, I'm not, let's say, propagating that we all practice bhakti yoga, but the philosophy behind bhakti yoga, and also, more importantly, faith, which is realizing that, as covered in the first episode, that I'm trying to become a full a human being that is acting in the fullest potential of being a human being, because I am human as being part of the universe, part of existence. So we must realize that in having faith, that we are part of something greater. Now, if we say, well, God provides, or if we say, well, we have faith in our guru or anything, the renouncing of our action as being the means by which all our success comes. That's basically the key principle behind bhakti yoga, behind detachment, behind renunciation. It's faith, which is, and it's not thought, and this is because thought is different from emotion, obviously. So it's not the thought of karma, it's not the thought of faith, it's the feeling of faith and the feeling of detachment that is important at this juncture. And that is what will continue and add to the strength and the energy levels, but it will act as a strong foundation to recognizing the fullest potential, which is the goal of spirituality. Now, that is why it is recommended as one of the key yogas. Bhakti yoga is considered one of the foundation yogas, which is, it is considered necessary, and it is, and it's obvious in the, when you take it to the mental level, which is the next bridge in spiritual progress, or let's say, well, it's at the brow chakra or the third eye, which is when a person arrives at this point, their awareness of thought begins to expand. They become more aware of the systems of nature. They become more aware of the systems of human beings and psychology and philosophy. It's not about studying the study of scripture, but the awareness of the principles that the scriptures are based upon. And I'm talking about the spiritual awareness here. I'm not talking about study. So there develops clarity of thought and clarity of perception. When this happens, if a person is not emotionally sound, hate can develop. When one begins to develop, let's say, the ability to see the systems of human behavior, it becomes very easy, if we are not emotionally stable, to criticize, to find fault, because there are faults, and this is where the faith comes in. All faults are by design. So technically there are no faults. And it's a real, let's say, silly thing to comprehend, which is the faults are by design, which fall in the nature of the object. And even as people, when we design machines, there are limits set on the machine. For example, if it's an electrical appliance, the appliance is made to work with a certain voltage, a certain amount of rotations of the motor, a certain, let's say a refrigerator chills to a certain temperature, and a deep freeze chills to a lower temperature. So by design, there are limits in the design. So we are not going to say that the fault of a refrigerator is that it cannot freeze something, because by design the refrigerator doesn't freeze. A freezer or a deep freeze freezes. Now when we take this universally, there are what may be perceived as faults by design, but really it is in the design of the thing. And we can see it in the world where people have for long pursued immortality, or try to extend good health and youth as far into old age as possible. Who is to say that the design of the human body is to be youthful into old age? It is the design. And so when a person who is developing spiritually moves into the realm of becoming aware of the systems of design of nature, if the emotional stability is not there, there is the danger of developing real hate and real, let's say, reproach, and this can be dangerous. Because the same way, for example, there's always examples in the religious scriptures, but even in modern society as well, where very intelligent people become very destructive. They just go down what we call the wrong path, and they use their intelligence to cause mayhem and destruction. And that comes from an unstable emotional development. So this is why in terms of the systems of yoga, Bhakti Yoga, or the yoga of love and devotion, is considered one of the foundation forms of yoga to practice, because it is absolutely necessary to develop love, and try to avoid using the word love because it's such a broadly used word. But it really is about first renouncing emotionally, not in thought, but in real feeling, that things work by design. And that is Bhakti Yoga. Otherwise, there will be a downfall at the mental level, which is, let's say, not only self-destructive, but has the potential to be destructive for society. So these are what I think are the three main bridges in spirituality. And when these three are soundly established, they are really fully developed, then the last bridge, or the final step in terms of becoming aware of the systems of nature and identifying with the systems of nature, becomes a very easy step, because it's at that point from the, let's say, the third eye to the final step is really, let's say, nothing. And I don't mean irrelevant, but it's almost automatic. So I think this is what is, let's say, not really spoken about in terms of what spiritual progress means, or what it takes in terms of spirituality. And this has been the focus of the last few episodes of Diksha, in terms of first laying out what was the principal idea behind spiritual progress and spiritual discipline. And then from there, taking it to what are some of the obstacles that one may face. And then in this episode, I looked at what are the three main stages or bridges in spiritual progress. And at the end of spiritual progress or spirituality or awakening or whatever, one realizes that it makes us a human being. It's the real goal of spirituality. Because there's nothing that says that the human being is not, if we look at scripture, for example, as reference, and various scriptures, for example, Jesus Christ walked on water, and he was able to predict the future and to heal the sick and bring the dead back to life. Buddha has similar stories. Krishna and Ram has similar stories in Hinduism. And even the mystics of the Native American cultures had similar stories. So it's not culturally isolated to India. It really is, if we look at a lot of examples, and these are the, let's say, the superstars of spirituality. But there are very many not so publicized and not so well known spiritual masters who have very similar stories. It is not to say that that is not what a human being is. That we look at them and say those are avatars and scenes. But I lean more towards the fact that they are what real human beings are. And it's the rest of the population that has not yet fully maximized their potential. And even Sai Baba, one of the famous quotes of Sai Baba is that the difference between him and us is that he knows he's divine and we don't. And I am by no stretch of the imagination a Sai devotee. I just look at a lot of the materials of various saints and sages and do a lot of reading. So it's you come across very similar themes in all of them. So I want to thank you for joining me on Diksha today, and of course this is the last video on the topic of the steps in spirituality. Of course, in the series of Diksha, on the program of Diksha, it is not the last time I'm going to speak about chakras and spirituality and human development. But specifically, I have not really heard it being spoken of too much about what spirituality is, what are the downfalls of it, what are the major junctures of spirituality. And so that is what was covered on the last few episodes. So I want to thank you again for joining me on Diksha, right here on Sankhya TV, the first Hindu TV station in Trinidad and Tobago, and your number one choice for inspirational, cultural, and spiritual programming.